Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Monday. Hey, I didn't jinx us all. We had a pretty good day for Halloween. Kids got out, did a little trick-or-treating, and honestly, it was a good day. I hope everybody got to get outside and enjoy. It's frosty in the mornings. I'm not acting like it isn't a little bit chilly, but geez, compared to some of the years we've had, it was a pretty darn good Sunday for having the kids out and doing a little trick-or-treating and, getting some candy and all that good stuff. Now, let's get on to today's episode sponsors before we get to today's show. Carly Kloss and the team over at Windsor Plywood, builders of the podcast studio table for everything wood. These are the guys. I always suggest going on to their social media, their Instagram, do a little creep in, and see what they got cooked up. Of course, they did build the podcast studio, and when you're looking for a slab of wood and you want something unique, I'm just saying, Windsor's got it going on. They got some really cool chunks of wood that you can, use for a table, like I did, the river table, or I've seen some mantles they've done, etc. And man, like I said, go on their social media, see the visuals for yourself. I mean, if we're talking mantles, decks, windows, doors, or sheds, they're the guys, all right? 780-875-9663 is how you get a hold of them. Jen Gilbert and the team, for over 45 years, since 1976, the dedicated realtors of Coldwell Banker, Cityside Realty, have served Lloydminster and the surrounding area. Star Power is what they're providing their clients with 7-day-a-week access because they know big life decisions are not made during office hours. I'm kind of curious. If you listen to this, I wonder if many people look at houses on Halloween. Would that tick you off to... You got your house for sale, and then on Halloween you gotta. Would you be upset about that? I don't know. I guess if you're trying to sell it, you're like, who cares? I just want to have somebody come take a look at it. Hey, I don't know. That's Coldwell Banker, Cityside Realty. For everything real estate, they are the folks 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I assume even during Halloween. Give them a call, 780-875-3343. Mortgage broker Jill Fisher. Obviously, her name says it all. She probably serves the areas of Lloydminster, Bonnyville, Cold Lake, and Vermilion, and she's looking forward to working with you for all your mortgage needs. I talk about this an awful lot, that right now mortgage rates are kind of bouncing all over the place. They got to be extremely low, and they've started to come up somewhat. I am not the expert by any stretch of the imagination. I just know if you're thinking about renewing your mortgage or you're buying a house, etc., why not take a look into Jill Fisher, jfisher.ca, or give her a call, 780-872-2914. She'll help clear up all the difficulties or the confusion around mortgage rates and get you to where you need to be. Clay Smiley and Prophet River. Yeah, and I drove by and they got I always love Prophet River. I feel like they're Fort Knox. Their newest play, or their current spot on Highway 17, when they built the gate out front, I'm like, yeah, that'd be that's a cool business where they get to have a little bit of fun, Like, how are we going to beef up security so nobody can get through this? Well, their new building has a giant overhead door, right? An overhead door to, come in and go. And they got this giant gate being built on it. I'm like, man, I want to even just talk to the guy who's building that. Like, what a project to have. Anyways, I'm a dork probably. Of course, they specialize in importing firearms from the United States of America. They pride themselves in making it as easy as possible. All that pesky paperwork, etc., that you can imagine comes with firearms. While they take care of that, they make sure it's an easy process. They obviously are the major retailer of firearms, optics, and accessories, serving all of Canada. Just go to profitriver.com and check them out today, all right? And, of course, a little update on the inside of that building. They got the flooring being installed, and phase 1 of their custom walnut cabinetry is complete and ready, is on its way. So very soon that place is going to be up and running. I look forward to seeing everything they got going on in there. Trophy Gallery, they're located downtown Lloydminster. They are Canada's supplier for glass and crystal awards. I just got a new box of mugs from Clint and the team. Man, they're sharp. They just, I'm a coffee guy, and I love a good mug. And I got these mugs with the SNP logo on it, and they're just they are sharp. Anyways, that's what Clint does. He makes the podcast look awesome. He can do the same thing for you. It certainly doesn't have to be a mugs by any stretch of imagination. The selection is quite wild. He can do a lot of different sizes, shapes, price ranges, etc. Just go to trophygallery.ca. And, of course, when I was walking through the store, he's got a bunch of signed memorabilia. Some of the new stuff I saw was Toronto Blue Jays gear. Then what a year they had. And, of course, we got the World Series going on right now. The Blue Jays aren't there, but you kind of get if you got a little bit of the ball fever going on, stop into Trophy Gallery and see what memorabilia you could pick up, all right? Or just go to trophygallery.ca. SNP, the billboard, if you're looking for outdoor signage, I push you towards read and write advertising here in town. They make the podcast look sharp. All I got to do is look around the office, whether we're talking the frosted windows or the wall quote, the S&P logo on the wall. That's all from the team over at Read and Write. Just give them a call today, 306-825-5111. And finally, Gartner Management is a Lloydminster-based company specializing in all types of rental properties to help meet your needs. Whether you're looking for a small office or a 6,000 square foot commercial space, give Wade Gartner a call, 780-808-5025. And if you're heading into any of these businesses, make sure you let them know you heard about them from the podcast, right? Now, let's get on to that T-Bar 1 Tale of the Tape. A doctor of veterinary medicine, a wife, a mother of two, and a concerned citizen. I'm talking about Brandi Suva. So buckle up. Here we go.
This is Dr. Brandi Suva, and welcome to the Sean Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the Sean Newman Podcast. Today I'm joined by Dr. Brandi Suva. So first off, thanks for hopping on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we got, when your story came down, I was saying before we started, I get a lot of things across my desk, my figurative desk. As you can see, it's more of a table. But when it came across, and then I started digging into it because, you live in my area. We went to school together. I'm like, okay, you got to come in here. We got to talk about this. Now, people have no idea what I'm talking about because we literally have people from all over Alberta, Saskatchewan, into the States, etc., tuning into this. So maybe first let's do this, Brandi. Let's just start with a little bit about yourself, some of your background, so people can get a feel for who you are.
Okay. Well, yeah, like you mentioned, my name is Brandi Suva. Born and raised in this area. We farm. And in addition to that, I underwent numerous years of education, 12 years to be exact, with a Bachelor of Science, which I achieved with an honors degree. And following that, I pursued my Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. Once graduating, I traveled to Toronto to undergo 2 years of additional training in the area of surgery, and then I completed my last year of training, third year in surgery at Washington State University, where I did a internship and fellowship position.
Did you actually get to go to Washington?
Yes, I was there for over a year.
Yeah. You lived in Washington for over a year?
Yeah.
What did you think of living in Washington?
Washington State, so Pullman, yes.
Yes.
It was fantastic, honestly, and that's where I met my husband. He's a former United States Marine. He was a sergeant in the Marine Corps, served his country for many years overseas, Iraq, Afghanistan. And during the time, after 9/11, with the war on freedom. So I absolutely loved my time there. Honestly, there are some of the nicest people in the world that you were around down there. You're walking down the street and people are just happy to talk and say hi and help out anybody. And it was just a fantastic situation. And the university is gorgeous. They are world leading in a lot of different surgical procedures in veterinary medicine. I'm very grateful to have been involved with that.
How on earth, I'm married to an American as well. I'm married to a girl from Minnesota. How on earth did you convince a Marine to move to Canada? That's
a good point. Yes, he is, he loves his country. Obviously, he will die for his country.
Yeah.
And I guess I will say what he said to me when we met and when, our relationship progressed and we ended up getting married down there. And he said to me, I will follow you anywhere. And I mean, it's a beautiful thing to say. And that's how. Yeah.
I always find it interesting when an American moves up here. I moved my wife from Minneapolis. We have a good idea of what Minneapolis, the size of it is, a couple million, to Hillmont, Saskatchewan.
Exactly.
Think about that.
Very different.
The bustling metropolis of Hillmont, Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm not here to talk about marriages and family. Well, maybe, who knows where it'll go. But I guess if you could lead us through what happened a couple days ago, and we'll start there, Brandi, and take your time. I'm going to apologize right away because my curiosity always gets the best of me. So I apologize if I ask too many questions or if they're inappropriate. I'm just curious, and I know the listeners will be curious as well to just figure out exactly what happened. So.
Yes. Well, like I said, I'm very happy to be here, except that I'm not happy to be here under these circumstances, unfortunately, to discuss this incident. I wish it was under a better situation that we were sitting here having a conversation. But the incident happened October 26th, a few days ago. Mark and I have 2 children, Hudson, who is 5.5, and Adeline, who's 2.5. And Hudson started kindergarten this year. He is on the Buffalo Trail Public School Division, and we live in the country, and therefore he goes on rural busing. His bus time is quite long, as most rural bus times are. In the morning, it's not so bad. It's about a 35-minute bus ride. But in the evening, it's an hour and 15 minutes in total, which is in itself, perfectly fine. The busing experience, especially, for me when I was growing up, and, you mentioned yourself, is, it's fun. It's a great time to be on a bus.
And it's something very normal in this area, right? Like,
yes.
Like when you say rural busing school system, people in the big city maybe have they certainly do it differently than we do it. But when you live in Hillmont, Saskatchewan, I always bring it back to Hillmont. Like the entire place is rural. So it doesn't matter where you live, you're on the bus, and sometimes that can be an hour and 15 minutes. Sometimes it can be 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But I think that goes across the board for where we live. All these little communities are rural busing systems.
Yeah, exactly. So Hudson and any other kindergartner on the bus, honestly, grade 1, 2, 3, our bus driver has always told us since we started him in school in September, is that he sleeps on the bus in the evening. So do the rest of them. This is fairly normal. Our bus driver jokes that you'll have kids that are, falling asleep and falling on top of each other, falling out of their seats and whatnot. And that's fairly normal. And, for a child the age of 5 who is now adjusting to their brand new career as a student, an 8-hour day away from home, and everything that is involved with that, their brain growing, all the stuff they're learning, sleeping on the bus is quite fine, and none of us have ever had an issue with it, and the bus driver's never had an issue with it, so that's fairly normal. But most recently, and what happened was Hudson, when they're riding the bus, are required to wear a mask. And I mention that because grade 4 and under in school, at least in our Buffalo Trail, is not required to wear a mask at school unless there's an outbreak, in which case they're required to mask for 2 weeks, and it kind of progresses from there. But on the busing situation, because it's public transport or considered public transport, they're all required to be masked. So Hudson had, as usual, fallen asleep at some point, we presume. And when they got to, our home, his bus stop, his bus driver attempted for about a 10-minute period of time to arouse him, essentially. She describes him as sitting there, slunched over completely in his seat. He's 3.5 feet tall. So really quite slunched in those seats, if you know what they look like. And what she could see was just his eyes, and they were staring forward and not moving. Otherwise, she couldn't see any more of him. She couldn't see his face. She couldn't see, he was wearing a hat, he was wearing his coat. We're getting into colder weather now, and he was wearing his cloth mask that, as every small child, as parents would attest to, is always soaked. And for that reason, I send him with, 4 and 5 masks to school so that he might change them through the day, as they become damp, or even the disposable masks. But it was completely saturated, and it was stuck to his face. And so after about 10 minutes of trying to, arouse him or get any indication of, response from him, my husband, standing outside of the school bus holding our daughter, and I'm not home, I'm at work 45 minutes away, was watching this and didn't quite get the gravity of the situation, because what he could see is that there's just somebody, she's trying to get his attention. So he assumed that Hudson was just simply sleeping. Our bus driver describes this situation as, what's going through her head is she's thinking, do I get up and do I touch him? Do I go to him? And she's scared. In her mind, she's scared to do that, because she's scared of the repercussions of what would happen if she was to do that, with everything that's going on with COVID, with people being, offended by having their children touched, or whatever it is. So this is what's going through her mind. She feels that she can't. It's been so inundated into her, what the rules are for her, that she feels that she can't go to him and assess him face to face.
Yeah, properly.
Yes, properly. So she calls my husband onto the bus, which again, right now, because of COVID, is not strictly speaking allowed. But she's in a situation that she can't now control. So he gets onto the bus, picks Hudson up. He is burning hot. He is, he's soaked basically, and he is just limp. He's completely limp. He carries him off the bus. He takes, his coat off. He takes this saturated, stuck mask to his face off. And he waits and does what he can, because at that point, Hudson is breathing. He's kind of moaning. It's not that he's completely blacked out. His eyes are open, but they're not really doing a lot. And so, we live fairly far away from the nearest hospital. So within that 10-minute period of time that it took Hudson to kind of come around, I'm on the phone, I'm listening to this situation, driving home from being 45 minutes away.
It's a parent's worst nightmare.
It is. It was a feeling of hopelessness. So, and just to set the record straight, Hudson did see his doctor and was assessed and has had numerous testing done, to ensure that there wasn't anything underlying, anything like that. But he came around extremely fast. Within a few hours, he was busy gluing a wooden tent together, actually, out of popsicle sticks. So, the long-term effects of this were nothing, but and everything that's been looked into him has been completely normal. And so the discussion, that has been had is a couple of things, a couple-fold, in that, children of that age, and I dare say, grade 4 and under, don't yet possess the mental faculties and the ability to recognize that when they are feeling lightheaded, hot, whatever it is, that they need to, for example, take their coat off, take their mask off, and that they can do that, because they just don't have that mental ability yet. Adults, we do. So his situation and, what this doctor and things like that we've discussed, it's almost likened to a toddler version of SIDS, or it could have been, wherein they fall asleep, they're hunched over, nobody's supervising them, because if this was truly public transport, I'd be sitting right there beside him. And, if I was worried about him, I would intervene immediately. But this is specifically unsupervised. So, and they're, like I said, they were hunched over, and, there's something obstructing their face. And so, the question becomes was this brought on by a mask? Was this brought on by the fact that he was sleeping and he got overheated? It doesn't much matter. The point here is that he was in distress. For some reason, he was in distress. And because his face was covered with a physical barrier, nobody could assess that.
Yeah.
So you can broaden that farther to any child. And I say child because I want to be very specific that these little guys on these buses don't quite have, the voice that an older child would, for example, or a teenager, that they can say, hey, I'm not feeling good, something like that. But any child that would be undergoing some form of distress, maybe a kid hit his head on the playground at lunchtime and they have a concussion a few hours later and they pass out on the bus and they have something covering their face. Nobody knows. Maybe a child is diabetic and they are hypoglycemic and they become lightheaded and they pass out, or whatever the response to that is. And they have something covering their face and nobody knows. They fall asleep and they vomit on the bus, which happens quite frequently, I've found out recently. They throw up into their mask, they fall asleep, they aspirate, and nobody knows. So this situation, I think, is very, very specific for rural busing and length of times, because these children are simply not supervised for hour, longer.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked. Well, one of my concerns of having you on, like, think of the world we live in, where I have to be concerned about like how this is going to be perceived, right? And maybe that world's always been there, and just it's heightened in COVID. But when you say unsupervised, this isn't to place blame on bus drivers or anyone like that. It's just the situation of what's happening for an hour and 15 minutes. They're driving along the road. I mean, as we come, God love our Canadian winters here. Sooner than later, we're going to have some nasty stuff. It's going to be dark. It's going to be deer moving, everything else. A bus driver is focused on one thing, getting our children to and from school safely, and that's their main focus.
Yeah.
You mentioned, why is it called unsupervised, or that's what it's termed by the government?
Yes, exactly. And so the term for unsupervised is not something that I have come up with on my own. This is inherent in the reason why there's no seatbelts on buses, because they have been deemed to be essentially unsupervised. And so if we seatbelt children, what potentially could occur there? Children slumping down their seats, the belt coming around their neck, all these things that cannot be adequately supervised by a bus driver busy driving a bus. They look back in their mirror and they can see faces. And now we've covered those faces. But when we're talking about these little kids are 3.5 feet tall. Yeah. They're slumped down in their seat. My bus driver has flat said to me that she can't, when he's sitting in his seat, she can't even see him. He's too short. Same with the other kindergartners, the grade ones. This is across the board. So this idea of it being unsupervised is inherent in busing, student busing. This is something that they've recognized already. So it's not a huge reach then to say that, you know, these children that are, you know, so at risk of not being able to respond adequately from having, you know, feeling lightheaded or whatever it be, you know, should not be sitting there unsupervised with facial coverings. You know, even the term mask isn't correct, because a mask is meant to, you know, have valves that get rid of oxygen or bring in oxygen, get rid of CO2. This is literally a facial covering. They're not meant to do that kind of filtering. So, but again, like I said, this is not a masking debate, because in adults, you know, if you're feeling, you know, lightheaded or hot or whatever it be when you're wearing your mask, and certainly everybody does at one point, you just remove yourself from the situation, right? You get up and you go outside and you take your mask off. You go sit in your vehicle. You pull it down because you're not scared of getting in trouble. These children are so scared of being in trouble for taking a few moments to breathe uninhibited.
Listen, we both have children. One of the things that like, when you tell the story, it makes the hair on my arms raise, because I have a 5-year-old who just started kindergarten, right? Fortunately, he's not on a bus. He's driven to school, right? So, like, we have dodged this for the time being, right? But I know there's a ton of parents that are going to immediately be like, empathy, right? Like, they're going to be like, holy crap. I grew up a rural kid. That's all we did was ride the bus. I was fortunate. I was first stop, so I was always off first. But I hated it because I always wanted to be the guy that got to ride for an hour and 15 minutes, because you get to hang out with friends and everything else, right? Yeah. When it comes to kids, we can argue at what age they know they can pull it down, etc., and when they can. But like, there's right now in society, I'd argue there are adults that don't feel comfortable pulling their mask down. The amount of social pressure going on to conform and to do what the rules state at all times, don't think about it, is unbelievable. And the fact that we have young children who are, and this will be my words, not at risk from COVID, not from getting it, from like the severity of it. And we're putting in place something, because I, as a parent, like if I rewind the clock and I heard they were going to make kids mask on a bus, I went, oh, that makes sense. Like, honestly, I got this rational part of my brain that goes, oh, I guess that makes sense. Like, they talk about COVID spreading in confined spaces, right? So we're protecting kids from spreading it to everybody. Okay, fair. So this was a protection, though, against something that they're not at risk of. And it almost caused, like, the worst outcome. And so we're doing things to try and keep kids safe. I hope I'm explaining this the correct way. Trying to keep kids safe from something that we shouldn't be afraid for them. Like, and all in the name of just trying to keep them safe. Yeah. Like, these kids, like, as parents, this is what and I watch it. I'll put it on myself. I was a part of an arena board a year ago where we had kids skating on the ice with masks on.
Oh my.
Right? And you're going like, and you're trying to like reason this out, but that was the rule across hockey, Brandi, is that kids ate on the ice. Kids need to have their masks on though. Yeah. Right? We're doing that to adults right now. Yeah. Right? If the rule right now is if you're vaccinated, you can go and play. If you're unvaccinated, you got to wear a mask. Yeah. And you're like, that's not healthy. That, like, physical exertion, one of the greatest things about this year, I thought, was that they weren't requiring kids to wear masks in gym class and physical exertion and outside. And I was like, oh man, maybe things are going to start to go back normal. And then this story comes and I go, like, we got to figure this out before something bad really happens. Yeah. So what have you been, you mentioned, like, this isn't where the story stops. Instead of just doing a Facebook rant, you put the story out on Facebook. That's how people hear about it. But since then, it hasn't been that long.
Yeah.
What's been going on behind the scenes?
Yes. So exactly, and thank you for bringing that up, because because of this risk for these kids of being, again, not seen to be in distress. I would like to say that I hope that this mandate in this situation specifically, where they cross the board with busing in rural situations as being public transport and therefore requiring masks, and that they just missed. Maybe they just simply overlooked the fact that small children will be on there unsupervised. Because that's my hope. Because I would hope that there would be nobody out there that would have, purposely made this decision to do this, knowing that these children are unsupervised. But having said that, ultimately, there's no one to blame with regard to the bus driver, with the children around him, with the school board even. The buck ultimately stops with the government and the mandate that's come down. And so with that in mind, I have been engaging a lot of different people in, heads of position to bring about a change in this situation specifically. So immediately that night, I drafted the email that has been widely shared on social media. And
if anybody wants it, just reach out to me, and I can pass it along.
Yeah. And I sent that to the entire school board and all the trustees that night at midnight. By 12:30, I had already received a response from our superintendent addressing this and, reaching out with compassion and empathy for the situation that we endured, that we didn't ask for, and saying that there is going to be a change, and the very next day, in fact, at their first Board of Trustees meeting, because there's new people on the board now with the election just being completed, this specific situation and the email that I sent was addressed in their meeting for about 20 minutes. We were able to watch it online, as you can, and unanimously they agreed to take this to the next step. So, but further than that, I've been in discussions with our MLA, Garth Roswell, and he's very impassioned by this specific situation, and will be speaking next week in Edmonton in their caucus meetings regarding this, because they also, agree that because of the inherent unsupervised nature of rural busing and the length of the time, especially these small children, they can't have their faces covered where they can't be seen. So, it's going to Edmonton next week to be discussed, and it's not going to stop there. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, this happened to the exact right or wrong mom, because I will not rest until this is changed. And I will die on this hill alone if I have to.
Yeah, but you're not alone. I
do understand that, and there's been so much outreach from people, and I'd like to talk about that actually in a second here. But if I was the only person that had to fight this fight, I would do it, because the other day I almost had nothing to lose. 10 minutes more on that bus ride may have been 10 minutes too late. There was almost nothing more to lose. I will stand in front of a bus or a train if I have to for my children. I will die on this hill alone. So it is more than just having, a letter or a description of the scenario on social media. My goal is to take this to the top until it is changed. And I'm not going to stop until I do.
Well, I think what you're going to find out, and you've probably already found this out, is you like to, in your situation, it won't be the same, but people like to make you think you're alone. And then you put it out, and the amount of, from what you've said, like, you're going to learn very, very quickly you are not alone. And, one of the things, I act like I hesitated in bringing you on. I never hesitated, but I did have an inner turmoil of, I don't want to just pick the 1 in a million story and try and cause chaos. Cause I've learned a couple lessons through doing this podcast, and at times, what I think is a smart plan causes a ton of chaos, and that chaos causes harm on people. And I understand that. To the listener, I really understand that. And so it's funny, the world we live in, my hesitation after I invited you on, which wasn't a hesitation, was more of the moral dilemma of, is this a 1 in a million story? And then I went, well, even if it is, it's a girl that I graduated high school with that lives in my area. If I don't talk about it, who's going to talk about it? I mean, it is an interesting world we are living in, where I even have that moral deliberation of like, should I bring this on? And all I got to do is just go, all I got to do, it's as simple as this. It's like, what if it was Shay? Shay's my 5-year-old. Like, what if he was the guy on the butt? Like, it's doing it to me all over again. All my hairs, like, my sole purpose, you talk about, I'll die on that hill alone. You won't die alone. There'll be 50,000 more parents that'll die with you on that one, because to me, that's, once you have children, you understand the responsibility that comes with it. We're here to protect them. They're going to inherit what we give them. That's what's troubling about everything that's going on right now, is how do we get this to the world that they want to, that we can leave for them? That's, and there's many a different idea on that. But when it comes to this issue, even if it is 1 in a million, it doesn't matter. This should never happen, like, ever.
Yeah, and exactly. And the comment from people might be that this was an isolated incident, and up until this happened, this was never even a consideration of mine that this could happen, because he goes to school, and at school, like I said, he's in kindergarten, so they're not required to wear masks. So for a half an hour in the morning and an hour and a half in the evening, I thought to myself,
you rationalize it.
Exactly, you rationalize it. I'm like, oh, this is not a concern. And I say that because in his situation specifically, he did 2 years of play school in Lloydminster, and he had to wear a mask. This is not a foreign thing for him. He tolerates it, fine. This is just something that he's learned to, live with, basically. So I thought, okay, well, a little bit of time, and then they get to school and they don't have to wear it. This isn't a huge issue until this. And I never even imagined in a million years that this type of situation could happen, until it did. And we talk about whether or not this was an isolated incident, and it was not. In fact, since I've had this, massive outpouring of people sharing the letter that was originally written and this scenario on social media, I've had a huge amount of mothers reach out to me with private messaging or email describing situations that are exactly the same as what happened to Hudson. In their small children, in their kindergartners, but even one mom has described similar situation with her 13 and 14-year-olds. So, and this is where we talk about how it's so sad that there's such a strong narrative out there right now that people don't think that they can speak up with a different opinion or with an incident like this that happened, because this is what these mothers are saying to me. They're saying to me in these detailed, excruciating emails of these situations that happened to them, that they didn't say anything because they were too scared of the outcome, of the repercussions, of how they would be perceived. And so they have either pulled their children off the bus, which when you're busing an hour, you can imagine how that changes your lifestyle, especially if you work full time, if you have both parents working full time. Having said that, the safety of their children obviously outweighs their level of convenience, so they drive them. Or they've gone through different routes with having, other kids in their family that are older, for example, pull masks down off their face when the little ones fall asleep. So they felt that they couldn't say anything because they felt they would be so ostracized, because the narrative right now is so strong against that. And, I'm not here to debate mask wearing in adults. I'm not here to debate efficacy of mask wearing. I'm not here to debate, anything even regarding COVID. So this situation is just a matter of safety with the little kids. But these moms have all said to me in their messages that they've sent, I've gained strength from your letter, from what you're doing, and I'm currently sitting down and I'm writing my own letter to my own school board, to my own MLA in the area, because this is going across, it's going across all the provinces. It's going into the states. I've had communication with people in New Zealand, regarding this and sharing it. I've had countless phone calls from bus drivers describing similar situations, all over Alberta, northern Alberta, southern Alberta, and asking to share this scenario with their school boards. So what was seemingly an isolated incident is in fact not. It's happening everywhere. And man, it's so too bad that people feel too scared to speak up.
But that's our own, that is a product of where we're at right now. Mm-hmm. I rewind back to what I said. If I don't bring you on to talk about this in our area, this is no knock on anyone in town or around Saskatchewan. I don't know. Maybe Global News has reached out to you.
I've had a lot of different places reach out to me, all the way to Calgary, Edmonton, a lot of, not specifically Global News as of yet, but a lot of different media streams.
I don't know why I single out Global News. I go to me, you don't, up until this point, things like this that go in the face of safety towards COVID do not get talked about. They get brushed under the rug. It's why nobody wants to. All these moms you talk about are I just get Johnny to pull down Ben's mask when he falls asleep. Just to think that's where we're at is wild.
Yes.
That is wild.
Yeah.
But it's also, we're sitting in a time that a lot of things, just common sense things, don't seem to add up. And a lot of what we see on the news every day is just the same old song and dance of it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. And it's we got to find a way to not let things like this continue to happen. Creative solutions. Get people talking and thinking. We've been all sitting in isolated rooms for too long and just, shuttered down, trying to go about our lives, not tread too much on, just quietly get our kids to school and make sure, right? Nobody, it's reasonable that they wear, okay, it's reasonable, right? Okay, that makes sense, right? And then, but this slaps it right in the face. Honestly, I don't know how many times my arm hair has got to raise every time you start talking about the story. Yeah. It's just, every parent can feel that. Yeah. Every rural area, when they hear this story, is going to go, holy shit, we got kids that ride the bus for an hour. This isn't isolated to our area. This is all across Saskatchewan, all across Alberta. I'm sure I'll have somebody reach out from Ontario saying, oh, that's Northern Ontario too, right? And probably BC. And this isn't isolated to just us. It's a system, and a successful system gets used across the board. Yeah. Right? And so if it's happening here, like you say, people reaching out, chances are there's going to be a lot of school boards get this put on their table and go, holy crap, we didn't even think about this.
Yeah.
At least that's what you hope, right? I go back to what you say. You hope they go, we overlooked this, or we didn't think it was a risk.
Yeah.
And now it is very blatantly a risk that nobody can turn away from.
Well, and exactly. And I think the idea of them thinking that they didn't think this was a risk is really key here. Because if you think back, about who is obviously making the mandates and whatnot, these mandates for masking, specifically, like I said, we're focusing here on the small children. We're focusing here on long bus rides. We're not talking about adult masking, but these mandates, regardless, are made by adults, for adults, with the interpretation of how it feels to wear a mask by an adult, with life experiences by an adult, with not a consideration at all of what does it feel like to be a 5-year-old in a mask. They're making these mandates from the viewpoint of an adult, and a logical adult will think to themselves, well, geez, it's really darn simple to take that mask and pull it off your face, or to, pull it away, or to remove yourself from the situation.
Or to not send your kid on a bus for an hour, right?
Yeah.
Like, why would anyone ever do that, right? Like, you can understand how somebody's going to try and rationalize this. They're probably trying to rationalize it right now.
Yes.
Don't rationalize it. This is not good.
Yeah.
Like, we got to figure a way to put the pressure back on the government to do what's right. And honestly, pull the masks off the bloody kids.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they need to come off.
Yeah.
Like, they've learned in sports. I'll talk about, we just had U7 practice. My son's playing U7 hockey, and I'm sure a lot of parents can either sympathize or be like, oh, that's awesome, because you get these little kids running around on the ice. I mean, it's awesome. But one of the great things is they don't wear masks this year.
Yeah.
And I can't speak to last year in U7. I just know in Intro to Hockey, where they're trying to learn how to skate, they were all supposed to have masks on, right? Well, that's gone. And because we should have known back then. But everybody goes, well, you didn't know and we're worried and whatever. Okay, let's rationalize that way. Yeah. Okay, but we've learned now.
Yeah.
And now we don't have them on them because they can't, right? Like, I've skated with a mask on, and at times I'm like, holy man, I got to slow down. And that's a grown man.
Well, they're not meant to be worn with physical exertion. Right, I stand in an OR for 8 and 10 hours a day sometimes with a mask on. Do I have an issue with that? No. It doesn't impede my breathing at all. And I've never had an issue with masking, and that's probably one of the reasons why I went into surgery specifically, is because I do very well with a mask. In fact, it doesn't bother me at all. Having said that, with the amount of years of teaching that I did of fourth year veterinary students who are between the ages of 26 as the youngest and probably into their early 40s, in that first semester of them doing actual surgical procedures with a mask on, and these are on cadavers, like, they're not going to hurt these animals, the amount of people that pass out because they become so overwhelmed with the fact that they feel they can't breathe properly is easily over 50%. And it happens time after time, year after year. It's normal. It's so normal that we have, a procedure that is just second nature at this point of how to catch these people sterilely, right? Because in the situation where we're dealing with live animals, of course, you don't want to contaminate anything. How do you catch these people sterilely so that they don't hurt themselves and you don't, put the animal at risk of contamination? Because it's so normal. These are adults. These are adults that have all their faculties about them. And so, another example, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now at this point, one of my, head technicians that I work with in the orthopedic surgery scrubs in with me every time. didn't eat breakfast that morning. And it's always the same thing that you see. First thing that happens is that their eyes become quite glazed. You talk to them and they look around, but they don't know you're talking to them. They don't understand anything. And then they turn a shade of gray that is, probably very similar to your walls here. And then within that period of time of when they look that way, you have about a quarter of a second to then have their body weight to, supporting it so that they don't go down and hit their head or be hurt. And that happened to her a couple of weeks ago. And this is a woman that's very adept with wearing masks all the time. So, yes, they're not meant to be worn with exertion. They're meant to be worn standing, right? But, again, really the masking debate is a whole nother situation that we'd like to keep over here. And the discussion that we've had with our MLA, with our superintendent, with the school board and whatnot is that we specifically have to look at the risk of, specifically in this case, small children on long bus times being unsupervised, wearing something that covers their face, that if we can't see that there is somebody in distress for whatever reason, literally whatever reason. I'm not standing here saying the mask is going to cause this child to pass out. I'm saying if we cannot see their face and we cannot see there's something wrong, how are we ever going to successfully intervene?
Yeah, we
are setting them up to fail. We are setting up everybody to fail. And these poor bus drivers that have to follow through with these mandates, the school board, the buck does not stop with them.
Yeah, we're setting things up to fail.
Yes.
Right? We're creating more risk instead of a risk reward, right? And when you frame it there very nicely, right? This isn't just about a kid can't breathe. This is about all the different underlying things that could happen to a kid, and you can't see what's going on.
Yes, specifically you can't see what's going on. And more so, there's nobody there to see what's going on. There's the bus driver who has X number of kids on her bus, who looks in the mirror every few seconds or whatever it is, who's busy driving the bus, honestly. She's, every time a kindergartner falls asleep, is she going to get up and go and wake them up and see if they're okay? Yeah, she definitely could. Would that result in something that is going to be effective? Well, it's going to increase bus times significantly, I can tell you that. Every 15 minutes, I got to get up and go wake them up and see if they're okay because they can't see them.
Yeah.
That's not a solution here. And it's not a huge step to say that going from school, where grade 4 and under doesn't have to be masked, to then going onto the bus, who of course is associated with the school, to say grade 4 and under doesn't have to be masked. This is not a big step we're making here.
No, you hope, I hope, that politicians do the right thing.
Yeah.
That AHS does the right thing. And next week, like as they sit, this shouldn't take 4 months to figure out.
No.
Because the thing we're walking into, we both know this. The thing we're walking into is this little thing up here called, winter. And it's going to be here for a while, which means it's going to be dark on those buses next.
Yep.
And they're going to be, how many layers you got to put on your 5-year-old?
Yep.
Right? And then to stack on a mask and a toque and everything else. And I mean, sure, take the toque off, take the gloves off. We get it. Like, as a parent, you instruct your kids, and I'm sure the bus drivers do too. We're just, at the same time, there's going to be more layers, more hindrances on seeing what's actually happening in the darkest, worst part of the year coming up.
Yeah. We're automatically going to have, like you said, all these other things going, covering them. And then we're adding this one more thing. And so it just becomes, honestly, a tipping point, really, of how difficult do we want to make this to assess children. I've had the school board come back with me and say, well, what if we have other children around them assessing them? I mean, think about that for a second. I had a hard time responding to that one because I said, how dare you put the health and well-being of another child on the next child over, who is, even a teenager dealing with the stresses of being a teenager in school or whatever it is. Everybody's dealing with something. I mean, yeah, we all need to be looking out for each other, obviously. If they see something wrong, they need to,
help.
Yes, they need to say something, at least to the bus driver. But how dare you pass the onus onto the child sitting next to them when this is a mandate made by adults?
Yeah, it's funny though. That's what's become a trend of all the mandates, right? Mm-hmm. The government is passing the buck on to businesses, and now businesses have to mandate it. Mm-hmm. And it just keeps getting pushed lower and lower and lower. Yeah. So now that, if you're a business in town, you have to mandate people what they're doing, right? You're a restaurant, you got to be the one checking. And if you don't, the government's going to fine you. Mm-hmm. It's like, right, this is all stemming back to where is the root problem here? Mm-hmm. We've hit around it about 7 times now. Mm-hmm. Government, right? Like, you want to get upset with somebody. I really feel for your bus driver, because
yes,
and bus drivers. I mentioned off the hop, like, man, I have some great memories of being on the bus, and in a rural school setting, of going to a friend's house and getting to go on somebody else's bus. Right, it was always cool. Yeah, the bus drivers were awesome. I assume it hasn't changed. So my heart breaks for the bus driver as well, because here's a person that is in a situation that you mentioned off the hop, like, they're not allowed to touch the kids. Well, and obviously there was a part of that once upon a time that was founded in, like, this really good thing, right? We're not going to lay hands on kids and whatever. Except there should be a giant asterisk. Like, unless this happens, then you're more than in your power and right to pull the mask off, to check vitals, to, like, provide first aid, to invite the dad on the bus immediately, because, like, if there's a situation, there's a situation. Like, it's a first aid response. Like, you gotta act, and every second counts at that point. Yeah. And I rewind it back and I go, man, I feel for the bus drivers, because, like, I really want to make sure that it's clear, and I'm sure we have made it clear, like, there should be no hate thrown at bus drivers now because of what happened on one bus. Like, bus drivers provide a pretty kick-ass service, and they are underappreciated for what they do, and dealing with our children at the end of long days or early in the morning and everything else. Yeah. And lots of them are just, like, awesome people. Kids love them, right? Like, but at the end of the day, they're put in situations that's is going to fail at some point.
They're being set up to fail. And I tried to be, very explicit in my letter that I wrote initially, and to all the conversations that I've had since, with all the different heads, that this is not on the head of the bus driver. This is, this has to be coming down from the top. Who they're being told, this is the mandate, this is what you have to do, and if you do not do it, you lose your job.
Yeah. Follow the rules.
Yeah. So can you blame somebody for wanting to preserve their job? I guess it depends on where you stand on that whole thing. I mean, how much of a foot you want to put in the sand. But ultimately, that's their livelihood. So they're just doing what they're told to continue to have their livelihood as they are. So no, we cannot have a simple fall person being, a bus driver, any bus driver. We can't have a simple fall person even honestly being the school board, because they're working in the confines of what the mandate has been given. Having said that, teachers have a teachers union that is their voice. Who is the voice for the children? It's the parents, right? But now we've had the ability to choose of what's safe for our children taken away. If we had the choice to say yes or no to masking or whatever it is, And something like this happened, and I had said, yes, put this mask on Hudson. He's going to school with this. And this happened. Who would I have to blame? I would have to blame myself. As I should, I am the parent. My job is to make the decisions of what is safe for him. But this was not my decision. This is a decision that's been enforced. So now, had the worst happened, had there been a fatality in this situation of a 5-year-old who, as we know, is not going to die from COVID, and he doesn't need to be busy protecting me with a mask on because I've made my choices.
As have I.
As we all have. I don't need my 5-year-old to protect me or my parents or anybody else around him. So had the worst happened here, had it been 10 more minutes, whose head would I have on a stake? You know, not actually saying that.
Yeah, figuratively.
Figuratively speaking. Who would I be suing for not enough money to make this ever better? Who would be, sitting in front of a judge in court, taking the fall for this? And because it wasn't my decision, it's somebody's that enforced this. So where would this go? And like we've said over and over again during this interview, the buck stops with the government. And the important thing that we have to note here, and that what I discussed with our MLA, is that this, and actually he voiced this, he said to me, how can this change right now? Because as it stands, this happened on, a Tuesday. On the Thursday, we drove him to school. I say Tuesday, Thursday, because that's kindergartners right now.
Yeah.
And he won't be going back on that bus until this changes. So, and that's him. But for all the other children out there,
yeah,
and like he said, how does this change tomorrow? How do we invoke this change ASAP? So that's the goal. And that's what we're going to, that's what we're going to the higher levels of government and Alberta Health with. And because, the hope is that this was just simply an overlooked situation. That them sitting in their city situations where ride times are probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes. They're not long. Children probably aren't falling asleep and whatnot and being unsupervised for that length of time that they just didn't realize.
Man, once again, I have zero idea. A guy should have looked. There's probably a study somewhere that is on bus wait times, how long, and I have no idea about the cities. You might get, after this, a couple of responses of actually bus wait times in the cities are long. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Like, it's just so foreign to me.
Yeah.
How can people help?
Yes, that's a good question. So, the more people that hear about this and it's fantastic that people are sharing this on social media and a lot of people are becoming either, enraged over the situation or have other opinions. That's all fantastic. But ultimately, having discussions with individuals is other than raising awareness, isn't so much the goal here. The goal is to target the people that are going to make this change. And so what everybody can do out there to make this change, to put the pressure on to make this change, is to write their MLA, is to write their education minister, is to write the health minister, to write their school board, their superintendent, and that's a start. You can add in your MP as well. And the more they hear about this, the more pressure they're going to be to make a stance. And speaking with our MLA, when I contacted him, And man, he responded with an excellent email back to me. Again, compassionate, that he feels that this is enough of a potential serious incident to move on a change here. But he said already, and this was within 24 hours of the incident, he'd gotten so many emails from people already. So he was very much already aware of the situation, before I had even reached out, and had already been in discussions with education and health regarding it. So the more people that put the pressure on and send these letters, because if you want to affect change, write a letter. You can't just go on social media and write an angry post. That's not going to get you anywhere. If you want to affect change, write a letter. Those are not disregarded. So that's what everybody can do out there. And I think that's what we need to do. We've touched on the fact that this apparently now is not an isolated incident, that it's happening to a lot of different children. But even if it was, even if this was the only child that this ever happened to, there's such a strong narrative out there that, every child matters, every situation, every child matters, no matter what they're being put into. So even if this was just Hudson that this happened to, that's one too many.
Well, I'll say this. In going into conversations like this, I've been trying, how can we constructively change what's going on? And the only thing that comes back to me is politics. Obviously, politics have the ability to enact change. The only way politics enacts change is when the population says it, they want it.
Yeah.
Which is why you coming forward with the story, getting people that are like-minded, that understand or have had similar experiences and are willing to write the letters and put pressure on, and we'll talk ours, I guess, Garth, right? Immediately when he feels that, it gives him the power to walk in the room and say, listen, guys, this ain't right. But I'm going to be extremely disappointed if this isn't changed within a week. Like, I don't know, Garth will hear that and he'll go, well, actually, it takes a month or something, right? Like, somewhere somebody's going to be like, Sean, you don't know how it works. Well, I said this to another guy that I think we need to start thinking about how politics actually works then, because what are we doing here? Like, we all, as parents, can stare at different situations with our young children and go, this isn't right. But we don't feel like we have the power to step in and go like, no. And I'm not saying bust into the schools. I'm not saying bust onto the buses. I'm just saying, if you go back to it, politics has the ability to change it for us. And we're the clients. So we need to start putting pressure on the right spots.
Yeah.
And our MLAs, MPs are a good start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we have to point out that somebody has to advocate for these children.
Yeah.
And if it's, the superintendents, the trustees, the school board trustees, because like we said, the teachers don't need advocating for, but because they have the children need that. And if these people that are in a position of power cannot put their foot in the sand and say this has to change because they're too scared of losing their job, of the backlash, then that is not the job for them. They should be willing to put their job, everything on the line, to advocate for the children, because that is literally what they're there to do. And if they're not willing to do that, they need to consider another career.
I'm going to give you I agree 110% with you. Mm-hmm. That fire right there is, I think a ton of parents see it that way.
Yeah.
One of the I had Eric Payne on, doctor from the Children's Hospital.
Yep.
And one of the cool things that I'm seeing happen right now behind closed doors, or maybe it's more public than I give it credit, is all these, we got For Kids Sake that meets, had been meeting regularly, and Kid Scotty still meets regularly. But that group is specific to here. And Eric Payne just literally put me in contact with like 2 or 3 groups in Calgary. We know of groups like this all across Saskatchewan, Moose Jaw, all through Regina, Saskatoon, etc. Yeah. And it's all looking. If there's people listening to this, what I'm trying to say is, I think there's a ton of power in it. We just have to find a way to unite it, so that it can actually put the right amount of pressure on the right spot. And I feel like we've all been searching for where the pressure point is. Well, the pressure point is government. Like, I think, the more we do this song and dance, it's like we all understand where the pressure is coming from. It's coming from up top. So how do we put pressure on them so that they change it and get rid of some of these things? And when it comes to kids, a lot of this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah. And we are seeing it. We're like, your story is just another one of where kids are doing things and everybody's like, huh. And my fear is always creating chaos when I talk about it aloud with people, because the anger goes to people that we all respect. There's lots of teachers we all love, bus drivers, school boards, etc., right? Yeah. But at some point here, we got to find a way to unite everybody, so that we can put pressure on the MLAs, so that they have the power and the confidence to go walk in and go, like, this isn't right anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm starting to see it with all these different groups forming. People all over Saskatchewan, Alberta, country, probably all over the world, are trying to figure a way of bring the parents together, bring the Brandis together, and go write the letters, put pressure, and get this changed so that kids aren't exposed to this anymore. Yeah, yeah.
No, exactly. And if you are watching this and thinking, geez, I'm going to write my letter, I mean, fantastic. And I will tell you that it will not be falling on deaf ears, and that everybody, like I've said, the school board, our MLA, superintendent, is in agreement on this situation. This isn't a fight that we're having to convince those people of what's happened here. Everybody's in agreement that it has to change, that's in a position to then move forward with enacting a change. So the more that they hear from people, it's just going to provide them with more and more evidence and strength to push for that.
I really hope you're right. The one thing I fear, I sat down with a guy from iCore Labs. You're obviously Monday's episode. Today is Monday if people are tuning in. And then the episode after you is the president of iCore Labs. They do antibody testing. Tests for if you've had COVID, or if you've had the vaccine, if you have the antibodies to fight off COVID, right? And I really hope governments will listen to this, because he's a guy that has a test that shows people with natural immunity. Now, I'm not trying to pull you into all these different taboo discussions, but one of the things that I find really hurts my brain is when it comes to what he does. He runs a business that tests people for antibodies. Mm-hmm. He can show 2 tests. One person who's tested with COVID, one person who had the double vax, they both show the same antibodies. Yeah. In my brain, that's what we're trying to get to, right? Is like where we're all protected. Yeah. But they don't recognize the one. And it's like, but why? Why aren't we doing that? Mm-hmm. And that's our own government that won't listen to it. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to this, when it comes to kids, I think one of the issues we've had over the last, and I've been guilty of this, I think a lot of people have been guilty of this, is empathy. We've almost lost the ability to be empathetic to everyone's situation, right? Like, everybody has their perspective. Everybody has their story. The ICU nurse, is a heck of a lot different than, I don't know, the guy who worked on the rigs all through this, or the school teacher, right? They all have their different perspectives of what they're seeing. And the 5-year-old kid is certainly a heck of a lot different than all three of those.
Yeah.
And we have to find a way to get back to being humans again, where we have a sense of community, treat one another with respect. We have dialogue and conversation. We're willing to listen to the other side. But we do what's right. And when it comes to kids, after hearing your story, I don't know who can say, well, I just don't know who can go, like, we shouldn't do that. This is why we shouldn't, right? Like, I think it's pretty hard to refute, Brandi. That's what I think. But maybe I'm wrong.
No, and you know, exactly. It is extremely hard to refute, because this situation that happened to him, you know, is, like I said, was he too hot? Was it a combination of stuff? As my doctor put it, is this the toddler version of SIDS, right? But more so than that, like we've said, extrapolate this to any child in distress where you can't see them.
Yeah.
So because that's where it has its power.
And understand, you said it, that people in veterinary school that are doing that have to wear it, over 50% will pass out. And that's adults that are trained in how to wear a bloody mask. Like, that should just...
And are training, exactly. And we train them to do it, right? Because this is not a normal thing to have something cover your face. So we teach them how to, you know, work with that, how to get used to it and whatnot. And it's not normal. And it's just, passing out is just, it's so normal with these masks when we're teaching these people to do it.
Yeah, we normalize weird things.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize that it is so, it is, and why would they, right? Because unless you're in these types of professions, you wouldn't realize that. But for the, you know, the layperson out there that doesn't realize that type of situation, you know, it kind of speaks to how passive we've been, I guess, with the, you know, use of these masks for all the situations that they're used in now. Like you mentioned, children doing sports in them. Like that's crazy to me when I stand there and watch fully grown adults hit the floor from just standing there.
Listen, right now, right now as it sits, okay?
Yeah.
I'll speak to senior hockey. Something you know, as you can tell from the walls, you know, I love hockey. I love senior hockey. Played for Helmond for many years. Had a lot of great times. And what they're forced with as a league this year, and all Saskatchewan is forced with the same choice. I can't speak to Alberta and other provinces. I'll just speak Saskatchewan. Since it's 18 plus, if they aren't all double vaccinated, they all have to wear masks to play hockey. Mm-hmm. That's the rule.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes it's. You might as well just say, listen, you can't play, because to have them all play with masks on, I mean, all it is to think that's going to be successful is laughable, right? Yeah. And it just becomes more pandemic theater, right? It's just a pandemic theater. So they're going to all wear it, okay. But then we're not even like going back to what you just said. In the profession that you have to train to wear a mask, 50% still are going to pass out because it's uncomfortable. It's trying to figure out how your body, geez, if you don't eat breakfast, right? Like all these things impact how wearing a mask.
Things, yeah.
And we're still, as governments out here, right? In order to have a senior hockey league play, you either all got to be double vaxxed, or if anyone's unvaxxed, you all have to wear masks and play a competitive senior hockey game that is full-on exertion. Yeah. I have, you know, you're talking about some men that maybe aren't in the best of shape anymore. Lots of them are, but there's some guys still playing that aren't exactly tip-top shape. To have them wear anything is, I'll say it, batshit crazy.
Yeah, but you know what? Ultimately, to play devil's advocate, it's a choice, right? You could not. in this situation that we're talking about with these children in school, what's the choice? There is not a choice. He couldn't have stuck his hand up on the bus and said, you know what? I need to go outside right now to get some fresh air. That's not a choice. He couldn't, so what do? Homeschool? Online learning? How do you online learn a kindergartner? The whole experience of kindergarten is going to school. I mean, people definitely do it and, great on them and whatnot. But we shouldn't be forced to change what we want for our children in schooling because of this risk, right? Or trying to avoid this risk, I should say. So, this and they're too scared because they've been told by their teachers, by everybody around them, if you take your mask off, you're in trouble.
Or you're going to infect people.
Yeah. They're too scared and they're too young they don't have the life experiences yet to say, doesn't matter, I don't feel good right now. I'm removing myself from this situation.
Listen, at 17, you don't have the life experiences that I did. We all did stupid shit at the age of 17 to probably 25.
Yes.
I'm not saying that you don't have enough to make your own choices. I think we've made it pretty clear in our country that at 18 you get to vote, you get to join the army, you get to do a bunch of things, you get to drink. In parts of it, certainly 19, but you get the general consensus. Yeah. In school, we deem kids young and therefore ill-equipped to make giant decisions. But right now, we're acting like they can.
Yeah,
that's been the last 2 years. Probably been longer than that. There's probably parents that will tell me that it's been the last decade that we keep putting more and more of life-altering choices on children. Now, that's a conversation for a different time. Where we're at right now is we have kids that are being put in places where we've deemed what we're doing is safe, and we've just talked about it for an hour, that what we deemed is safe is actually causing risk. And that risk can and will affect kids all over the country, not just here.
Yeah. Because
rural busing is a thing in this country because our country is big and wide and spread out, which means you bus for a long time. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So this is something that all parents across the province, across the country should poke their head up and go, oh man, that is unnerving.
Yeah. Because like me, they probably never realized that was even a consideration of a risk.
Yeah.
Like I said before, it never even crossed my mind. And not only do we have to enact change here, but we have to make people aware so that they know that this is a risk. Like, if you drink and drive, that there is a very big risk there.
Or if you smoke a pack of cigarettes.
Yes, exactly. So people need to be aware of risks. And this is not even something that was even, like I said, I wouldn't even consider it.
I don't think most parents would consider it. No. We just rationalize it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like they're going to, like I can just hear my brain thinking about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So this was not me going on a rampage against masking. And from the start with this, I've done everything I can to, try to keep things moving forward with complying with, mandates, with doing what I can to be, safe in the community. For the most part, I've just kept my head down and continued to work. I haven't made a stink about it. I haven't done, because I believe that we would get through this.
I think everybody believes
exactly.
we'd get through this.
Yeah. And then this happened. And it is now something that I am so steadfast with that I will have to continue it till the end.
Well, I appreciate you coming in and telling your story and where you're at. I'm really, as a parent with the same age kid going through the same experiences at kindergarten for the first year, I'm really happy to hear everything's okay. Right. Mm-hmm. I think, I don't know how I would have had this conversation if it was a different spot. And I don't mean to be morbid. I don't know if I could have, I probably would have been a blubbering mess. Like it sounds cheesy to say that. I just like, to me, the amount of times that I even talk about it, my hair rate, like it's so, I can just put myself in your situation and understand that this is terrifying. And I would have never thought about it. Listen, we just rationalized it how many times that we didn't think about it.
Yep.
Regardless, I appreciate you coming in, and I will make sure that anybody that reaches out and trying to get a hold of you, that type of thing, that we find a way that they can constructively help with whatever direction this pushes you. Before I let you go, we normally, it's been funny. I've been doing this final segment now for 2 years, the Crude Master Final Five. And the thing is as the conversations have evolved, I've just changed it into the final question with Crude Master. I'm sure listeners have caught on to that. But with you, normally the question I ask is who you'd want to sit down with to pick their brain like this. But I think in this situation, I'm curious with this direction you're about to head, right? And trying to put pressure on AHS, the government, etc. Who do you want to get in a room with? I think is my final question for you.
Yes.
Who can we put the pressure on to come sit and hear this and try and make them, like, they can't dance this, I guess is where I'm at. So who's the person you need to get in front of? And I'd like to see if for you, I'd like to see that happen, I guess. So who's the one person, have you thought about that, of like, we need to get in front of this person?
Yes. Actually, as I've been working through this and starting with, the levels that you would go through and working your way up with discussions with how to move this forward and enact change. And the person that I have my sights set on to have an in-person discussion with is Dr. Hinshaw. 100% it comes down to her. And I say that because our government has given so much power to AHS to make the decision, and that office, the Office of Public Health, and that they've sloughed it off onto them, honestly. They've given her so much power, or that office, that position, so much power to enact these mandates. So I need to have a conversation with her to describe to her the scenario that happened and ask her face to face, what would she have done had the worst happened? And how would she have made it better? And how will she make that so that it doesn't happen again? So I would love to speak with as many people as I can about this, but I want to have this conversation with her as a mother.
I hope she'll listen. I hope she'll take that.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming in and doing this with me and being open about it. Listen, the best case scenario happened, right?
Yes.
Hudson's okay.
Yep.
Things are great. It does not take away the emotions I see on your face right now.
Yeah.
As parents, we all have had, I assume, I know from our experience, we've had those scenarios where, if I go back to certain points, it does exactly what is happening to you right now.
Yeah.
And so I just really, really appreciate you coming in, sharing it, being open, to letting the audience hear what happened, what you're doing. I think the world needs more people like Brandi to go and draw the line in the sand. I hope it doesn't have to come to the same spot that Hudson got to. Like, that's not just that. We need more people to take a stance and to say no more, like no more. And I'm hoping that by doing this, it spurs on opening up doors for you, to get to the people you need to talk to, because I think you, and the way you've talked today, I have a lot of hope that it's going to do a lot of good.
I sure hope so. My job as a veterinarian is advocating for animals and working with their owners on how to, ensure that they have the best possible life and outcome on a daily basis. That's my job, is advocating for them. We need to advocate for our children because they can't for themselves.
Yeah.
So for me, this is not a big leap. I've been advocating for, my children, their entire life, I should say. And now we need to take it that step further.
Well, thanks again for coming in and doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Hey folks, thanks for joining us today. If you just stumbled on the show, please click subscribe. Then scroll to the bottom and rate and leave a review. I promise it helps. Remember, every Monday and Wednesday, we will have a new guest sitting down to share their story. The Sean Newman Podcast is available for free on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you get your podcast fix. Until next time.